Psalm 50, verse 7. The Lord says, "Listen, my people, and I will speak. I will testify against you, Israel. I am God, your God. I do not rebuke you for your sacrifices or for your burnt offerings, which are continually before me. I will not take a bull from your household or male goats from your pens, for every animal of the forest is mine. The cattle on 1,000 hills, I know every bird of the mountains, and the creatures of the field are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and everything in it is mine." Psalm 50, verse 16. But God says to the wicked, "What right do you have to recite my statutes and to take my covenant on your lips? You hate instructions and you fling my words behind you. When you see a thief, you make friends with him and you associate with adulterers. You unleash your mouth for evil and harness your tongue for deceit. You sit maligning your brother, slandering your mother's son. You've done these things and I have kept silent. You thought I was just like you, but I will rebuke you and lay out the case before you. Understand this, you who forget God, or I will tear you apart and there will be no one to rescue you. Whoever offers a thanksgiving sacrifice honors me, and whoever orders his conduct, I will show him the salvation of God." Psalm 50 is a psalm of judgment. You know, one of the things about Christianity that the world does not like is that Christians often judge other people. And honestly, it's a fair accusation. The reason is not the judgment part. The reason often is that because when Christians judge other people, they're not even doing the things that they're accusing other people of not doing, or they're doing the very things that they are accusing other people of doing themselves. It's this hypocritical nature of saying, hey, don't do that sin or don't do that thing. And then a person who is a non-Christian watches a Christian do that or do something else. And they're like, hey, you shouldn't judge me unless you put your own household in order. You need to work on yourself before you judge other people. Now that's one of the things about judgment that could be very challenging. Most people like judgment for other people, but they want grace and mercy for themselves. And Psalm 50 is a judgment from God to his people. It's an interesting one because he tackles his own people first, and he calls all of the earth to bear witness. It's an interesting psalm because God doesn't say to his people, hey, watch me judge the world. He actually does the opposite. He asks the world to come watch as he judges his own people. And that should be a massive lesson for us, is that if God is going to judge someone, who do you think he's going to judge first? He's going to judge those who follow him, or at least those who claim to follow him. For Christians, this means that people who have claimed the name of Jesus Christ in their title, I am a Christian, a Christian. They claim that name, they are following someone. They will be judged on the standards of Christ himself. So God gathers the world to watch God judge his own people. Again, this should be a big lesson for us, is that if God is going to judge someone first, oftentimes we think that God is going to be on our side as he judges the world or judges other people who do not know him or doing things against his commands and his way. And that does happen. The people who get judged first, though, are the people who follow him. So in Psalm 50, God gathers the world. He says, watch as I judge my own people. And it's almost like he's sitting them down and he's saying to Israel, I'm going to judge you first because you should know better. And he tells them, hey, your sacrifices, I don't need those. I'm glad that you bring them to me, but you have said you were in a covenant with me. And then he begins to kind of widen the lens of this movie, this theatric way of looking at their lives. And he looks back and he says, you see all this? You see all of it? It's mine. Every sacrifice that you bring to me, because they had an Old Testament sacrificial system back then, any bird, any goat, any cattle, it all belongs to me already. I don't need it from you. I'm glad that you're going through the motions, and I appreciate that. But all of this, it is mine, says the Lord. I own it already. And what he's doing is he's attacking something that, again, as Christians, we should be so wary of, is that when you just go through the motions, you have lost the meaning. The sacrificial system was an intent for people to return back to God, to remember that they were totally and utterly dependent upon Him. The sacrificial system was a way for them to remind themselves that they were sinful people that needed a holy God. That when they sacrificed an animal, they knew they were bringing an animal that belonged to God. They were taking it to God, and they were saying, God, please, you have every right to judge us, and you have probably found us guilty. And we need to sacrifice in order for us to be aware of our guilt before you. And sacrifices were never intended to take away sin, but they were a symbol of God telling them, you need me, I am a holy God, and if anyone is going to forgive you, it's not based on what you have done, it is based on what I have done. So for Christians, we need to understand this as well, is that we could go through all of the motions. And if we have lost the meaning, we may not bring sacrifices to God anymore. But if we were to go through baptism and to come to church and through our prayer life, and if we were to take communion, and if it would just be a mechanical thing that we do over and over and over again, and if we've lost the meaning of being in the presence of a holy, saving, gracious, powerful God, we've lost the purpose behind those things. So God continues on in Psalm 50. He says, you may go through all of these mechanical, methodological, or just ritualistic ways of honoring me. You took my covenant on your lips. You entered into a relationship with me. You said with your lips and believed with your heart that you would follow me. And you're going through the motions and you look good on the outside, but the covenant has not reached your heart, and therefore I will judge you. And I want the world to see what it is like to follow a holy, powerful, gracious, and also judging God. When I was in high school and I had just gotten my license, I came back from water polo practice one day, and I was driving my truck, and I was driving down, just trying to go home. I was in the car with a friend of mine, and there was an accident in front of me, and the police were there, and they had checked on this person, little fender bender, nothing bad. And so I came up to the car and I went around it in order to get to the next light. And I went around it, didn't think anything of it, came to the next stoplight and saw sirens behind me. And I realized one of the police officers had gotten off his bike and it was talking with the person who was in the accident, and then got back on and chased me down to this light. And he pulled me over, and he says, you know why I pulled you over? I said, no, I don't know why you pulled me over. And he said, well, you went over some double yellow lines. Like, we were at this stop helping this person, and you went over the double yellow lines. And I thought to myself, me and my friend, we've driven that road so many times to and from high school, and we were like, there's no double yellow lines back there. And I said, hey, I think you're mistaken, but I was only like 16 or 17, and there's an officer who's experienced there, and I didn't want to disrespect him, and I also was pretty sure I knew what I was talking about. I said, there's no double yellow lines. He said, yes there are, so I'm gonna have to write you a ticket. So he's writing me out a ticket, and my friend and I are sitting there, and he's just like, man, if this is something that you think is really true, we should go back and check. So after the police officer wrote me a ticket, I was like, I want to go back and look. And so he goes off, and I kind of wait until the next day. And so the next day, my friend and I drive the same exact route, and we see there are in fact no double yellow lines there. And so I take some pictures with my terrible phone at that time. So I was like, all right, I am going to fight this. I'm going to go to court and I'm going to fight this. And I'm just 17 years old. And one of the things that was going to be a real challenge for me is that the judge portion of it. You know, the judge sits a little bit elevated from where you are. I'm a 17-year-old kid. You know, this is a person who's been in their career for a long time. And so I show up with my pictures. I'm ready to kind of fight my case. Police officer doesn't show up, and I'm like, I'm vindicated. I get it. But there was this moment where I was like, what is this judge going to say to me? You know, am I going to get out of this? Am I going to go to jail for a simple traffic stop? Probably not. But I was scared and just didn't know what to come of the judge in this sense. And sometimes we treat God like that, is we're afraid of his judgment, and we think, man, he's going to be so harsh on us, which realistically, you know, we're coming to him and maybe there is something we have done wrong that is worthy of judgment, but also that God is just such a gracious judge. He disciplines us, he corrects us, and he also tells us the things we have done wrong, and there may be a penalty or a consequence for what we have done. But ultimately, God as judge, he wants us to go free through his son, Jesus Christ. Ultimately, hopefully, someday we get to show up, you know, to this metaphorical courtroom, and Jesus is our defendant, and he says, hey, they're with me. He's with me. He's innocent because of me. And this should be a big lesson for you and I. You know, as Christians, we must not be what much of the world thinks us to be. The people who want to judge other people and we don't want to look inwardly at ourselves, at what we need to work on. And what we should actually do is we should actually welcome the judgment of God, because God's judgment is holy and perfect. Yours and mine, ours isn't. The way we judge people is imperfect, and oftentimes it's just a way to take the spotlight off of ourselves and to put it onto someone else. But when God judges people, he says, I see inside of your heart. I know your past and what you have done. I know what you're doing presently. And if you continue to do that, you will have no place for me in the future. We should welcome God's judgment on our lives, because when he judges us, he reaches deep within our heart and deep within our soul, and he says, this does not honor me. And I want you to honor and love me and respect me, because I have the right to judge you. We should welcome his judgment.